Most leadership training fails. That's the brutal truth. Companies globally spend over $300 billion every year trying to teach people how to lead. Yet, surveys consistently show that over 70% of employees believe their direct manager is the most stressful part of their job. Something is fundamentally broken in the way we approach leadership. We glorify the technical geniuses, the visionaries, the hardest workers. We assume that if you are the smartest person in the room, you should be the one in charge. But history, and perhaps our own experience, has proven that a high IQ does not automatically translate into exceptional leadership. So what does? If it's not intellectual horsepower, not work ethic, and certainly not positional authority, what is the single neurological mechanism that separates legendary leaders from average managers? The answer has been hiding in plain sight, obscured by vague terms like soft skills. But it is anything but soft. It is the operating system that every high-performing team runs on. In this video, we're going to decode what I call the resonance engine. We won't just discuss the theory of emotional intelligence. We will dive deep into the neuroscience of how your emotions, as a leader, physically altered the brain chemistry of your team. And most importantly, I will give you a practical blueprint to upgrade your own leadership operating system. Welcome to Psych Blueprint. Get ready to change the way you see leadership forever. To understand the resonance engine, we first have to dissect why the old models fail. In the 20th century, leadership thinking was dominated by the command and control model. This model assumes that the leader is the smartest person in the room, and their role is to make decisions and ensure compliance through authority, logic, and sometimes fear. In this model, emotions are a distraction, a bug in the system that needs to be eradicated. Meet Alex. Alex is the head of engineering at a fast-growing tech startup. He is brilliant. His IQ is off the charts. But Alex's team is struggling. Meetings are tense and silent. People are afraid to bring up ideas because Alex is notorious for harshly criticizing anything that doesn't meet his perfect standards. When confronted, Alex says, "I don't understand. I give them the solutions. Why can't they just execute? Work is not about feelings." Alex is trapped in the old paradigm. He sees emotions as a distraction. But by doing so, he's inadvertently creating an environment that paralyzes the very capabilities he needs most from his team: creativity and collaboration. This is where we introduce the new paradigm, the resonant leader. This concept was popularized by psychologist Daniel Goleman, who brought the term emotional intelligence, or EQ, into the mainstream. Emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize, understand, and manage our own emotions, as well as to recognize, understand, and influence the emotions of others. Imagine your team as a complex, high-performance engine. In the old paradigm, Alex believed his job was to use willpower to push the engine faster, but he was putting the wrong kind of fuel into it. He was using the fuel of fear and pressure. This created massive friction and wear and tear. The engine started shaking and eventually broke down. The resonant leader understands their job is to tune the resonance engine. They use the fuel of trust, empathy, and shared purpose. They adjust the components so they work in harmony. The result is resonance. The engine runs smoothly, powerfully, and effectively. The resonant engine is built on the 4 pillars of emotional intelligence. The first 2 relate to yourself: self-awareness and self-management. The other 2 relate to others: social awareness, empathy, and relationship management, social skill. We will dive deep into each of these, but first we need to understand why they matter so much on a biological level. And we also need to address a crucial question that Google spent millions of dollars trying to answer. What truly makes the perfect team? Their answer, from the famous Project Aristotle study, aligns perfectly with everything we are discussing.
To truly master the resonance engine, we need a clear understanding of its components. The 4 pillars of EQ are not arbitrary. They are arranged in a hierarchy. At the foundation is self-awareness. This is the ability to understand your own emotions, strengths, weaknesses, and drives. If you cannot identify your own emotions, you cannot manage them, and you will certainly struggle to recognize them in others. Next is self-management or self-regulation. This is where self-awareness is translated into action. It does not mean suppressing emotions. It means managing your disruptive impulses to create optimal effectiveness. Think of it as the engine's cooling system. Then we move to social competence with social awareness, at the core of which is empathy. This is the ability to understand the emotional makeup of other people. Crucially, empathy does not mean agreeing with someone. It is about understanding their perspective. Finally, relationship management. This is the culmination. It is the ability to use awareness of your emotions and those of others to manage interactions successfully. It includes inspiring, managing conflict, and building strong relationships. This is where you use your EQ to create resonance.
Why does emotional intelligence matter so much? It is not just a psychological concept, it is deeply rooted in the neuroscience of how our brains are wired. The human brain has what is called an open-loop system. This means that our limbic system, the emotional center of the brain, is profoundly influenced by the emotional states of those around us. This leads to a phenomenon called emotional contagion. We literally catch the emotions of others. This is partly due to mirror neurons, which allow us to feel what others are feeling. In a team, the leader is the primary source of emotional contagion. Their emotional frequency is transmitted throughout the group. If the leader is chronically stressed or angry, they broadcast signals that trigger the stress response in the brains of their team. When we feel threatened, our amygdala, the brain's alarm system, takes over. This is known as an amygdala hijack. When the amygdala is highly active, our prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for complex thinking and innovation, is functionally impaired. Simply put, fear makes us dumber. This is exactly what is happening in Alex's team. His harshness is keeping his team in a constant state of amygdala hijack. They cannot be creative because their brains are too busy dealing with the emotional threat. Conversely, when a leader creates resonance, they create an environment of psychological safety. In this state, our brains function optimally. The team becomes smarter, more creative, and more resilient.
When we talk about emotional intelligence in leadership, there are always skepticisms. The most common skepticism is, does this mean I have to be nice all the time? How can I make tough decisions? This is a crucial point. Emotional intelligence is not about being nice all the time. It is about being effective. Sometimes the most compassionate thing a leader can do is to give direct, difficult feedback. The difference lies in the execution. A leader with low EQ will deliver negative feedback in a way that is demeaning or blaming. They make it personal. A leader with high EQ will deliver the same feedback with clarity, compassion, and a focus on the behavior, not the person. Another nuance is the dark side of emotional intelligence. Can EQ be manipulated? Absolutely. If a person has high social skills but lacks integrity, they can use these skills to manipulate others for personal gain. This is the hallmark of toxic leaders. This is why self-awareness of your core values is so important. EQ must be used in service of a purpose higher than self-interest.
Finally, there is the question of whether EQ can be learned. The research is clear that EQ can be learned and developed. Unlike IQ, which is relatively stable, EQ can increase significantly through conscious effort and practice, thanks to neuroplasticity.
The impact of emotional intelligence on leadership effectiveness is not just theoretical, it is supported by substantial data. Research has shown that EQ can be twice as important as IQ and technical skills combined in predicting excellent performance. In senior leadership roles, nearly 90% of the difference between outstanding and average performers is due to EQ factors. Companies with high EQ leaders consistently show higher employee engagement, lower turnover, and increased profitability. Why? Because when people feel understood, valued, and safe, they do their best work. Let's return to the question about Google's study, Project Aristotle. Google spent years studying what made some teams successful while others failed. They found that the single most important predictor of team effectiveness was psychological safety. Teams with high levels of psychological safety were more likely to innovate faster and achieve their goals. And as we have explored, the primary creator of psychological safety is the emotionally intelligent leader. Let's return to Alex. After receiving anonymous 360-degree feedback from his team, Alex was shocked. They described him as unapproachable and stress-inducing. With the help of a coach, Alex began his journey of developing his EQ. He learned to recognize his frustration and pause before reacting. He started asking curious questions instead of criticizing. Gradually, the team dynamics started to shift. Collaboration improved. The quality of the work increased. By creating a psychologically safe environment, Alex unlocked the collective intelligence of his team. Now, how can you actually implement this?
Here is your blueprint for mastering the resonance engine. It involves 3 phases: diagnosis, stabilization, and upgrade.
The first step is to understand your current frequency. You need to diagnose your level of self-awareness. Exercise 1, the Emotional Trigger Journal. For 1 week, log whenever you feel a strong emotion at work. Write down 3 things. What was the trigger? What happened? What was the emotion? Name it specifically. What was your reaction? What did you do? This exercise helps you develop self-awareness by analyzing your emotional patterns. Exercise 2, closing the feedback gap. Most leaders operate in a feedback vacuum. You need to proactively seek honest feedback. Ask specific future-oriented questions. For example, what is one thing I could do differently that would help you do your job better? When you receive this feedback, your job is only to listen and say, thank you. Do not argue, do not justify, just absorb it.
Once you have diagnosed your patterns, the next step is to stabilize your system and prevent amygdala hijacks. Technique 1, the physiological sigh. Closing open loop 3. When you feel yourself getting triggered and stress rising, you need an emergency circuit breaker. Neuroscience has shown that the fastest way to calm your nervous system in real time is through breathing. Here's how you do it. Take 2 quick inhales through the nose, a deep inhale, then a short second inhale, followed by a long, slow exhale through the mouth. Just 1 or 2 repetitions can immediately reduce your stress levels. It works by rebalancing the carbon dioxide levels in your blood. This is your emergency pause button. Technique 2, name it to tame it. When you are in a stressful situation, silently name the emotion you are feeling. For example, I am feeling defensive. The very act of labeling an emotion can reduce its intensity. It shifts brain activity from the amygdala to the prefrontal cortex, helping you regain cognitive control. Technique 3, cognitive reappraisal. This is about changing the story you tell yourself about a situation. High EQ leaders are masters at reappraising negative situations into opportunities for growth. Instead of thinking, this employee is so lazy, reappraise it as, this employee is struggling with motivation. How can I better understand their challenges?
With a stabilized system, you can begin to upgrade your leadership style to proactively create resonance. Strategy 1. Practice expert-level active listening. Most people listen to respond, not to understand. Active listening is about being fully present. Try the technique of mirroring. When someone says something to you, repeat back the essence of what they said in your own words. For example, so if I understand correctly, you are feeling overwhelmed and you need more clarity on priorities? This makes the other person feel deeply heard and validated. Strategy 2. Adopt the platinum rule. The golden rule is treat others the way you want to be treated. The platinum rule is treat others the way they want to be treated. This requires empathy. You need to understand that different team members have different needs and motivations. Take the time to understand your team members as individuals and adapt your approach accordingly. Strategy 3. Demonstrate deliberate vulnerability. This is the most powerful strategy for building trust and psychological safety. Many leaders believe they must appear perfect, but this creates distance. Deliberate vulnerability is about being willing to admit your mistakes and ask for help. When a leader says, "I was wrong," or "I don't know the answer, let's figure it out together," they are signaling that it is safe to be imperfect. Paradoxically, vulnerability in leaders is often perceived as a sign of strength and confidence.
The journey from commander to resonant leader is not a quick fix. It is a lifelong commitment to personal growth and self-mastery. Today, we have explored that emotional intelligence is not just a soft skill, it is the operating system of exceptional leadership. We have delved into the neuroscience of emotional contagion and the power of psychological safety, and we have laid out a practical blueprint for mastering the resonance engine. We have seen that as a leader, you are setting the emotional frequency for your organization. You have the choice to create dissonance and fear, or to create resonance, trust, and high performance. The choice is yours. But the real work begins now. Theory is useless without action. So here is my challenge to you. Commit to taking one specific action from the blueprint we discussed. Start with phase 1, diagnosis. Right now, do the emotional audit exercise. Think about your last interaction at work. What did you feel? And what is the primary emotion you wanted the other person to feel? Be honest with yourself. That self-reflection is the first step toward transformation. The world is desperate for better leaders. Leaders who are not just smart, but wise. Leaders who understand that their most valuable asset is their people. Be that leader. Master the resonance engine, and watch how your team, your organization, and you yourself transform. Thank you for watching Psych Blueprint. If you found this video valuable, share it with someone who needs to hear this message. And keep building a better world, starting with your own mind.